All right, everyone, let's make sure I am live, doing those good old checks before I get started here. And let's see, it says upcoming. Let's make sure that it's now live. Okay. Let's see, when I see my face, it's a go. All right, and I see my face, and so welcome. Welcome, everyone. I am Josie Warren. I am the autoimmune expert, and we are going to be talking about a video topic today that is incredibly relevant. It's important. This is a scary situation we are in our world with autoimmune diseases, and I can't wait to dive in. But first, for those of you who are new to my channel, you need to get to know me a little bit better. That I'm not just someone who read about autoimmune diseases in a book or studied this in school. No, for about 15 years of my life, starting at age 16, rheumatoid arthritis was my first one, I struggled with autoimmune diseases. And by the time I was 28, I had 8 autoimmune diseases, MS being the last diagnosis that was finally the one for me to wake up and realize that everything I was doing for my autoimmune diseases, like Hashimoto's and lupus, all the food allergies I had, the anxiety and the depression, the rheumatoid arthritis, the Raynaud's syndrome, the CVID, nothing was working. The food diets weren't really working. The supplements weren't really working. And the medication sure wasn't working because I kept getting more conditions. And like I said, by the time I got MS, I had to face the music that something needed to change, and there was a piece that I was missing. And that's thankfully when I was guided to a new life center where I work here in Denver today, where I met the founder, David Cope, who developed our work, and he helped me understand that the reason I wasn't healing and my body kept getting sick, that it was me, that I was the problem in a good way, and thus I could be my own solution. And it was my emotional state that was creating the dysregulation of my body that was causing my autoimmune diseases. When I resolved my emotional state, my body healed in about 3 months, and all of my autoimmune diseases permanently healed. No, I'm not in remission. I don't do any food diets. I take no supplements. I see no specialists. I take no medication. I'm fully healthy, have been for 10 years now, and that is the pathway I take my students down who take our courses. That is what I share about on this channel. And so today the topic is there is an autoimmune epidemic in young women, and here's why. So there is an epidemic of autoimmune diseases, first of all, worldwide. And to me, it's shocking that the world out there doesn't even know what an autoimmune disease is. If I talk about what I do for my career to, say, someone who's cutting my hair or someone at the grocery store, I have to always explain what an autoimmune disease is because I realize the general public doesn't even know. And we'll talk today, the doctors don't even know what an autoimmune disease is. And even those of us who have an autoimmune disease, it'd be hard pressed to really describe it. So here we are at the forefront here at New Life Center for the last 18 years, the forefront of this worldwide epidemic on autoimmune diseases. And first, let's define what is an autoimmune disease. Well, an autoimmune disease is a disease in which the body's immune system, which is meant to protect us, it becomes dysregulated and it mistakenly attacks the very tissues and organs of our body that it was designed to protect. And so instead of protecting us, it actually starts attacking us. Okay, so the dysregulated immune system is the singular problem for an autoimmune disease. That is why a person has one, and as long as that immune system stays dysregulated, we can't heal. We'll talk more about this in just a moment. But first, let me share with you some shocking autoimmune disease statistics showing what an epidemic this truly is. So autoimmune diseases are increasing worldwide at a rate of 12 to 19% a year. 12 to 19% a year. 50 million Americans have an autoimmune disease. Over 100 different types of autoimmune diseases have been identified, and 25% of people with an autoimmune disease have more than one autoimmune disease. 80% of all patients diagnosed with an autoimmune disease are women. It's primarily, autoimmune is a women's disease. There are men that have autoimmune, but primarily it affects women. And this is where we're going to be our jumping off point for today. The sharpest rise in autoimmune diseases, if what I just shared isn't shocking enough, the sharpest rise is in adolescence. And adolescents are individuals aged 12 to 19. That autoimmunity in adolescence has tripled from 1988 to 2012, and it keeps growing. This is from the National Institute of Health. They also go on to share that autoimmune disease prevalence in children has doubled in the last 8 years, going from 10% in 2010 to 20.8% in 2018. In 8 years, autoimmune disease in kids has doubled. And most importantly here, of adolescents, girls are 3 times more likely to develop an autoimmune disease than boys. 3 times more likely. So adolescents, the sharpest rise continuing. This is the future of our world right now, and autoimmune diseases are doubling and tripling in this population, and girls are 3 times more likely. What's going on? And before we go into why are adolescent girls on such a rise for autoimmune diseases, a couple autoimmune disease statistics on some specific autoimmune that I want to share with you, that over the last 30 years, this is all from the National Health Council, by the way. Over the last 30 years, the prevalence of celiac disease, that's where people have to be gluten-free because of the immune system is attacking that gut lining. Prevalence of celiac has increased 5-fold, doubling every 15 years. The estimated number of people with MS, multiple sclerosis, worldwide increased 30% in a span of 9 years between 2013 and 2022. 30% increase in MS in a 9-year period. And between 2006 to 2021, in a 15-year period, the prevalence of IBD, or inflammatory bowel disease, increased 46%. IBD increased 46% in 15 years. So, and it's shocking that our world doesn't even quite know what an autoimmune disease is, and here it is. It's becoming the most problematic health conditions for us as humans worldwide. And the scary thing is that doctors, scientists, and medicine are no closer to finding a solution or a cure for autoimmune diseases than they were when they first came onto the forefront back in the early 1900s. They are no closer to finding a solution to permanently heal. They don't even know where they're coming from. But we're going to talk about what the solution is today. And so today what I'm going to be sharing is our hypothesis here at A New Life Center of why. Why is there an alarming increase in autoimmune diseases in adolescent girls? Why is there this alarming increase? And I'm speaking about this from my own experience. I am part of that statistic. My first autoimmune disease, I was 16 years old. So right there in my teenage years, it was rheumatoid arthritis, and that happened in 2003. So I am part of this, of what I'm sharing today. And here at A New Life Center, we believe that there are 2 components for the rise of autoimmune diseases in adolescents, especially young girls. And one of those is the immune component. So clearly, autoimmune diseases are a problem with the immune system. If a person has a weak immune system, they're much more susceptible to autoimmune diseases. If they have a strong immune system, much less likely to get an autoimmune disease, right? So these have to be happening from weakened immune system has to be a component. We'll talk about that. And then also we're going to talk about the emotional component. There's the immune component, but there's also the emotional component. How does our emotional state contribute and work with the immune system to cause an autoimmune disease? And what is creating this incredibly unhealthy emotional state in young adolescent girls that in a degree that we've never seen before? So I'm excited to share both of our theories for that, to better understand what's going on in our world. And please, like I shared, know this has been me. Like I said, I came here 10 years ago. I spent my adolescence and my young adulthood as a young woman with autoimmune diseases. And I went down all the rabbit holes thinking maybe it's the toxins, maybe it's the GMOs, maybe it's the Epstein-Barr virus, the genetics of my family having autoimmune disease. And I'm here today completely healthy to tell you from the get-go, no, it's not any of those. It's not any of those components for what is causing this prevalence of autoimmune diseases. So first, we're going to talk about the immune component. What is causing weaker immune systems overall in our young people, in our adolescents? Well, here at New Life Center, we believe it's the rise in vaccinations in children. The rise in vaccinations in children that began in the late 1930s. So a couple, I think, important statistics right here. These mandatory vaccinations for children here in the United States, they really started primarily in the early 1940s. And in the 1940s, there was 4 vaccines that were children were given, right, required by children, 4 in the 1940s. Let's fast forward now to 2020, where they last took these statistics. In early 2020, there were approximately 14 different vaccinations that children were required to have, right? So we're going from 4 to 14 by the time of 2020. And that rise really started, if we look at statistics, of higher vaccinations in the 70s and in the 80s. And this doesn't even include the COVID-19 vaccine that I'm sure has then come after this early 2020 statistic. So our children are very much vaccinated. And here's why we believe that vaccinations are indirectly creating a weakened immune system in children. You think about the different childhood illnesses and diseases, and what's the purpose of that in a positive way for an immune system, right? So think of the immune system like a muscle, right? If we don't work our muscle, what happens to it? It gets weak. It gets weak. If a person doesn't go to the gym, you can't, or work out, that muscle is going to get weak. So we look at the immune system from that lens. That's what helps me understand this. And think about the illnesses and diseases that children get as the gym for the immune system muscle. Well, if we now in this modern day and age have a vaccine for pretty much most all of the illnesses and diseases that children could get and used to get, well, then what's happening to that immune system? It is not being strengthened. It is not being worked, because every time an immune system has to fight off an illness, a child's immune system has to fight off an illness, some kind of illness or bacteria, right, or infection. What is that doing to the immune system? It is building the immune system's resilience. It is strengthening the immune system. And what vaccinations are doing is taking away that strengthening and that resilience of our immune system. So it's not the actual vaccinations, we believe, that are directly weakening the immune system. It is an indirect weakening because the vaccinations are taking away the immune system's capacity to grow, to build, and to strengthen. And remember, autoimmune diseases are an immune system issue singular. right? So we can imagine an individual with an already weakened immune system, a child with an already weakened immune system, because that immune system doesn't have to work much, is at a much higher risk for developing a dysregulated immune system down the road, because that immune system already isn't strong. I was someone who definitely had a very weak immune system as a kid. I was always getting, strep throat, illness, colds, infections, I had allergies, all of those things, all really good warning signs that from a very young age, I had a weak immune system. I was also I was born in '87, so I had all the vaccinations that a child born that year were supposed to have as well. Coincidence? Who knows? I think not. So that's what our theory on the immune component and vaccinations. And again, indirectly weakening that immune system. So that's setting this child who's growing into a teenager, growing into an adolescence up for a much higher risk. Now, let's go into the emotional component and how these two tie together. So we take that already weakened immune system, right, that we believe is being caused by vaccinations. And then on top of that, you throw on the emotional stress that adolescents go through. The emotional stress, especially adolescent girls, which is coinciding with the rise of social media. The rise of social media. What role does the rise of social media play in the heightened emotional fragility and stress of young adolescent girls? And what's the connection there to autoimmune diseases? And remember, the reason we are focusing today on adolescent girls, adolescents, again, the highest rise continuing of autoimmune diseases, and adolescent girls 3 times more likely to develop autoimmune than boys. So this is an adolescent girl condition. So first, I'm going to share, before I go into the role of social media and the landscape of the emotional state of an adolescent girl, I want to share my story. Again, by the time I was 28, remember, I had 8 autoimmune diseases. These didn't just happen to me. And here's my story. So as a young girl, I remember comparing, and this is my story, but as women, as you're watching this, think about your experience as a young girl and think about yourself as I'm sharing my story, that I compared myself from the youngest age I can remember always to other girls, starting when I started school in elementary school. You know, how do I measure up to that prettiest girl in school, that most popular girl in school? I would look at myself. I would look at the girl magazines like Cosmopolitan or Cosmo Girl that I used to get. Those are the ones that I remember. Look at those models, look at those photo shoots, look at those movie stars that I looked up to, women like Julia Roberts, Jennifer Aniston, the Olsen twins, Lindsay Lohan. And then I would look at myself, and all I would do is compare. I would criticize myself always. They've got this, I don't have that. I wish I looked like that. I wish looking in the mirror, wishing that my forehead was smaller, that my nose was smaller, that I had blonde hair and not brown hair, that I had tan skin, and I did so much then in my early adolescence as I moved into middle school to try to change the way that I looked, because I didn't like who I was compared to these idealized people out there, whether that was the pretty girl at school or whether it was Jennifer Aniston on Friends, right? So I went on a quest to change myself and how I looked. I got new makeup. I tried highlights in my hair. I got different clothes. I tried lightening my hair, which, as people with brown hair know, doesn't work. My hair just turned orange. But I tried to be someone else. I tried to be someone that I was not. I tried to be what I thought was better. And this comparison that I was always doing with other women, it caused me to feel really, really bad about myself, to really beat myself up. I mean, we know a self-value level and a confidence level at below 0. You know, I constantly was anxious. I would pick my hair. I was always combing my hair to make sure it was perfectly straight. Just looking down, I struggled to even look people in the eye sometimes as I moved into adolescence. And this was exasperated as I moved into high school, which again, now I'm moving into that adolescent girl that is at that highest risk for autoimmune diseases. Because what's happening there? Yeah, I went through puberty. I gained weight. I got acne. My kind of straight hair became kind of curly. And I went into high school, started comparing myself to the most beautiful girls in our school. I went to a high school here in Colorado that's known for the level of physique of the students that go there, the prettiest girls, with the best outfits and the nicest cars. And I was just kind of maybe a little above average. I wasn't rail thin. I didn't have blonde hair, and I really wasn't that popular. I didn't have it together like some of these other girls, and all I wanted to do was be them. All I wanted to do was be someone else. And what I really did is, as I wanted to be them, my hatred of myself just grew and built. I still remember how much I hated myself at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. If you had a line of 100 people and I was one of them, I would have never picked myself. Never picked myself. I always wanted to be somebody else. And so what happened to me is after I graduated high school, it coincided with the rise of social media. And I saw, as I went to a smaller college, an opportunity to reinvent myself through the pictures that I could present on social media. I thought, here's my chance to be like those girls in my high school and out there in the world that I aspired to be. So what did I do? I developed an eating disorder. I went from about 135 pounds to 105 pounds in just a few months. I tanned. You guys can see I'm a pale person. I became very tan. I whitened my teeth. I straightened my hair. I worked out every day, and I spent all of my money on clothes. I created a new me, and I threw the old one out. And I kept doing this. I kept at it for about 10 years, everyone. 10 years. I kept up this fake me. So all through my college years and beyond, it was the fake me that I presented on Facebook. And I ended up having about 5,000 pictures by the end, by about 2013 or so, of this fake me with my wonderful life and my aspirational body. And I spent all my time making sure I had these perfect pictures of me in swimming pools and laughing on the beach, going to parties with friends, dancing at clubs and on tables and eating, food and having a little coffee in foreign cafes and going to exotic destinations. I'd always take pictures of the incredible hikes that I went on and made sure that I was always smiling. I was always laughing. Everyone thought that I had the perfect life. It was the fake me. Other women told me they were intimidated by me. I got much more attention from men on social media. And again, it was all a fake persona that I created. It was a fake me. And it never was enough. It never was enough. There was always someone else that I saw on social media or out in my life that I thought was better, that was more beautiful, that had a better life. And I was never happy. I felt awful and miserable, probably even worse than I did in high school. And I became trapped. I became trapped in this fake persona of social media persona that I had created. But this was all what I showed people behind the scenes. It was a dark place. Behind the scenes, it was a different story than I presented out there. Behind the scenes, I was racking up about 1 to 2 autoimmune diseases every year. I had severe anxiety. I had severe depression and a very severe eating disorder. Through those years of my late adolescence into early young adulthood, I became allergic to most foods. By the time I was 28, I could only eat about 3-4 different foods. I was chronically sick all the time. I could barely hold down a job. And off camera, I was a complete mess. My world was closing in. Right? So can we see here, I know this from my experience, how bad I felt about myself as a young girl, and then the persona that I had to keep created and then upkeep that was completely false on social media created such immense emotional turmoil in storm inside me. It's not a coincidence that I can start to develop many and very severe autoimmune diseases, because I was at a boiling point of emotional stress, having to keep this whole persona alive and well on social media. That fake persona that I had, it created this like constant and chronic strive for something more and something better. So social media exasperated for me that emotional state, that unreal me, and that unachievable life. And ladies, this is what's happening to our young women, our young girls out there. This social media, this constant comparison. Let's go into this and how this is creating autoimmune. But first, we have to paint the picture of the reality of life as an adolescent girl. I know if you haven't lived it, you really don't know, unless I guess you're a dad out there and bless you if you have an adolescent, a teenage girl right now, you actually probably do know. But what's going on underneath all of that is we are living in a constant state of emotional fragility as adolescent girls. It's very, very hard. Those are some of the hardest years of my life. And a lot of it revolves around competition with other girls. The other girls as adolescents, the competition between girls is ruthless. Girls are mean, they're catty, they're mean-spirited, we're cruel towards each other. You know, your friend one week, your best friend could be your worst enemy the next day. And the drama that we live in, there's a constant fear of rejection. We're boy crazy and then terrified of rejection. Our hormones are through the roof. We're going through puberty. Our body's changing. We're gaining weight. We're getting acne. We're getting our period. And back to that constant competition with other girls, it really is unspoken, but it's always there 24/7. Always looking to the prettier, the better girl that they strive towards, and looking for kind of striving towards a limit that keeps growing, that is unachievable, an unachievable standard of what we should look like and what our life should look like as a teenage girl, that is unreasonable and is unrealistic. And this creates an immense amount, if you can imagine, of emotional stress and pressure that we put on ourselves to be more, to be someone that we're not. And again, to the ladies that are listening today, put yourself back, and most of us don't want to, but put yourself back in those shoes. Have the courage to go back to how you really felt in adolescence. And please, if you're out there and you're saying, oh, that wasn't me. No, I didn't compare myself. I was happy, and I was a tomboy, or it was you too. That's what I told myself. I called myself the chill girl, and inside I was just a constant competition, a constant comparison, a constant emotional storm that was going on inside of me. And so now this is the experience of an adolescent girl. So we're already at a risk for autoimmune disease, as you can imagine, because our emotional state is so unhealthy. And if we've been vaccinated, that's indirectly causing a weakened immune system. But what's social media have to do with this rise? And again, this is our theory here at A New Life Center. Well, you take everything that I just shared, and now you add in social media. So for me, a lot of this happened at school, but at home, I could come home and I could kind of check out from all of it. It was just me and my family. Girls these days, they can't do that. They are in a constant comparison of themselves towards others all of the time. That what they're now doing is they're going home and they're on their phones and they're on their laptops, and they're hours and hours of scrolling, daily scrolling. And what is that scrolling primarily for social media? They're looking at pictures of other girls, other adolescent girls, idealized girls, and their idealized lives. That's all being portrayed falsely as real and as authentic. Again, I'm speaking from this because I tried to do this to other girls out there. And as you can see, it was all one big facade. So it's not just school anymore. Adolescent girls, because of social media, are being faced constantly with what they're not. And they constantly. And social media is creating a constant stress and a constant pressure in our adolescent girls that they need to live beyond their own capabilities. It's creating a deep dissatisfaction within themselves and of themselves and their lives. And they're constantly comparing themselves with these ideal lives, these ideal bodies that someone else has that they don't have. So all social media does for adolescent girls is take their already fragile emotional state, which already is beating themselves up, feeling unseen, feeling ugly, not feeling good enough, terrified of rejection, terrified of being alone and having no friends, and constantly picking ourselves apart. This is the reality has always been this way. And then social media turns this emotional state to a boiling point. It puts this fragile emotional state of adolescent girls on steroids, thanks to the constant bombardment of unrealistic, of idealized images and pictures that reflect back to them and make them feel terribly bad because they know deep down that's not them and that can't be them. And that strive to try to be something that you're not creates a mass emotional storm in our adolescent girls. And it is our emotional state. This is very important. This is the immune system connection. It's our emotional state that is what dysregulates our immune system. Our emotional state dysregulates our immune system. And then that dysregulated immune system attacks different tissues or organs, creating an autoimmune disease. So I can't think of a population in our society that has a harder time emotionally right now in our modern day and age, again, exasperated by social media, than adolescent girls. So to me, clear why adolescent girls are at the sharpest rate of autoimmune disease that we have ever seen, and it keeps growing. And are we going to sit here on the sidelines and watch this happen and watch our young girls turning to young women, turning to mothers getting destroyed? Or are we going to do something about it? Do we want to be the solution to the problem? I know I do. I know I do. So this is important. If you're out there and you have an adolescent girl and you see that she's at risk, or maybe she already has an autoimmune disease, this is a very important section for you. You need to know that you're not going to want to work with Western or alternative medicine if you want to permanently heal her autoimmune disease. Why is that? Because whether you go to Western medicine and they're going to prescribe you prescription medication for your autoimmune disease, or you do Western and functional, do functional and alternative medicine, things like homeopathy too, mind-body medicine. And what that's going to be is going to be food diets. It's going to be cleanses. It's going to be blood work, supplements. All of that, Western, alternative, functional, it's managing symptoms. It's managing symptoms. It is symptom management. Symptom management is treating the symptoms of your autoimmune disease, not the true root cause. And we can see here, while vaccines, we believe, weaken an immune system indirectly, it's our emotional state that really is what causes that immune system to dysregulate. The emotional state is the true root cause of autoimmune diseases. And there is no symptom management routine out there, whether that's natural or not, that can ever scratch the surface of our emotional state. So to heal, we have to re-regulate the immune system, right? This is an immune system problem with autoimmune diseases, and we have to recognize that it is our internal emotional state that causes the dysregulated immune system. And again, just what I just shared, can you see how social media, what that's doing to the emotional state of our young adolescent girls out there? No wonder they're getting autoimmune diseases. So we have to resolve that internal emotional state. And how do we do that? Well, we have to eliminate the stressor that's causing this really unhealthy emotional state. That stressor is how we feel about ourselves. How we feel about ourselves is the stressor that causes a very unhealthy emotional state that then dysregulates our immune system. So in order to eliminate that stressor, we have to learn how to feel good about ourselves. That's right. The solution for autoimmune diseases is we have to learn how to feel good about ourselves. That's what I had to do. I had to realize how awful I felt about myself. And that's a vast understatement because I developed 8 autoimmune diseases, very clear. And I was a therapist, by the way. I know I've shared this in previous videos. I was a licensed therapist who clearly felt terrible about myself. And then I came here to a new life center and I learned how to feel good about myself again. And my body rapidly healed and repaired. And how do we learn how to feel good about ourselves again? Well, that is exactly what we teach here at a new life center. It's called emotional medicine. Emotional medicine. And it was birthed here. We are the only ones practicing emotional medicine. And if you want to learn more about what emotional medicine is and how it works to permanently heal autoimmune diseases by allowing us to feel good about ourselves again, I am including a link down below to a live I did this spring that was all on emotional medicine. And the title of that video is Why Psychology Heals. Why Psychology Heals, not medicine. Great. So let's summarize what we talked about today. Now, we've established that we are at the forefront of an epidemic of autoimmune diseases. The statistics do not lie. And the scariest thing is the rise of autoimmune in adolescence. It's the highest rise. And of those, adolescent girls are 3 times more likely than boys to develop autoimmune. So these autoimmune diseases are happening to our young adolescent girls, age 12 to 19. Why is that happening? What is going on in our time right now? And again, here at a new life center, we have a theory of what it is, and it's 2 components. It's the immune component, it's the emotional component, and both of these work together to create this rise in autoimmune diseases. So again, vaccinations, unfortunately, have taken away our young children's immune system's ability to be resilient, to grow, and to strengthen by learning how to fight off all of these different illnesses and diseases and becoming strong. And so these vaccines, we believe, are inadvertently weakening and causing weakened immune systems in our children, right? So that's already creating a risk. And then you throw on top of that, especially since 2010, the rise of social media, So our young adolescent girls with their smartphones are not only comparing themselves to all the girls at school and the girls in the magazines and the women in the movies, but they are constantly scrolling these fake idealized lives of pictures of other girls and other women, and all they're seeing is what they're not. All that's causing them to do is feel deeply insecure and bad about themselves and create a very deep, unhealthy relationship with themselves, a very unhealthy internal kind of chronic emotional state. That those 2 put together, it's our emotional state, unhealthy emotional state that dysregulates the already weakened immune system that then begins attacking different tissues and organs, thus creating autoimmune disease. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today for this very relevant, very important live. I'm going to hop over to the comment section before I jump off for today. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care.